Okay, now we're back on the problem. We're going to tackle part C next, which is the variable overhead spending and efficiency variances. So we need to calculate the spending variance and the efficiency variance. We slide back to where we were, and I'll show you the solution and I'll walk you through how this one works as well. Why don't we, leave it to here. We'll focus right in this area in here. Again, actual on the left, standard on the right. So this time we're going to use the actual machine hours times the actual rate. And the reason we're using machine hours, they told us in the problem, let me slide up, somewhere here, based on machine hours. So variable manufacturing is 0.5 of machine hour. So let's see how we come up with this. I've got 7,400 at $2, and actually we wouldn't know the actual rate. We would know our total spending, and we would know the actual machine hours. So total spending was 19,240. The actual machine hours was 7,400. Let's see where they gave us that. There's our variable manufacturing overhead was 19,240, and they tell us that a total of 7,400 machine hours was recorded. So we drop in 19,240, we drop in the 7,400 machine hours, and then we compute the rate. And the rate happens to be the 19,400 divided by the 7,400, which comes out to be $2.60. Now over on the standard side, keep in mind we're making 15,000 pools, and we've got to multiply that by some value, and that value that we have to multiply that is given right here. Variable manufacturing overhead is 0.5 hours based on machine hours per pool. So if they, since we're using machine hours, we take 15,000 pools times 0.5. So the standard called for 7,500 machine hours, and I believe the standard is at 310 per hour, and that's per machine hour. So we drop in 310, and then we just simply multiply. So keep in mind that 7,500 came from that interim calculation of 15,000 pools times 0.5. And we come up with 23,250. And now the rest should look very much similar to what we've seen before. If we slide the 7,400 over to come up with actual quantity, slide the 310 over to come up with the standard price, we create this middle ground, or no man's land. And then we can compare the 19,240, compare it to the 22,940 to compute a spending variance, right? So this is spending variance. It's the difference in price of the variable overhead when we used 7,400 machine hours. When we compare the middle ground to the standard, we're actually comparing at the standard machine hour rate, the dollar per machine hour, which is 310, we're comparing the difference between 7,400 and 7,500 quantity used. So when we do that, we hit the F2, and that difference turns out to be 310. Now it's favorable because this number is lower than that number. Using this approach, whenever the number on the left is lower than the one on the right, it's favorable, right? It goes the other way, you have an unfavorable variance. So I've got 3,700 favorable spending, $310 favorable efficiency. Add the two together, and we come up with $4,010 of total variable overhead variance. Next, we tackle requirement 2. It says, using the data we've computed, come up with the net overall favorable or unfavorable variance for the month. So I'm just going to illustrate what that answer was. That was my cell phone telling me it's fully charged. That's what that beep was in the background that you probably heard. So now all we do is we drop in the variance we've computed. We already computed the material price variance, the material quantity variance. Keep in mind, favorables are a positive number, negatives are unfavorable. Just drop in all those variances, right? There's the 310 comes from there, the 3,700. Okay, so we've worked all of these, and then we just sum the variances. Okay, so that's our summary of the variances. And requirement 3 says choose the two most significant variances that you have computed. And I've highlighted the two largest numbers. and they happen to be negative numbers, which means those are probably the areas we want to investigate, which is the material quantity variance and the labor rate variance. Okay, so those are the two largest variances that you want to compute. I think there's another part of this one that says what would be our actual cost of goods sold after we adjust for these variances. And what we would do is we would take the budgeted standard variance of 220. The budgeted standard variable cost of goods sold would be $220,050, and I believe that's given in the problem. I'm not sure where it's given. Let me take a look here. Okay, now what I did is I calculated that, and all I did is I took the sum of all the standard variances we already calculated. So for materials, the standard called for 86,400, for direct labor 110,400, and variable overhead was 23,250. If you add all those up, that's where the 220,050 comes from. Okay, so that number essentially is that number right there that was plugged in. Probably makes sense if I move this over the top. That's probably the better way to do this. So now you know where it comes from. And then we would tack in the variance. Since they're unfavorable, it will increase the cost. So actual variable cost of goods sold, I'll double underline that, is going to be $227,120.